On today's Fast Friday, two separate aperture ring settings. They cause some confusion. Let's clear it up. Hi everyone and welcome to Pal to Tech. Today we are talking about two settings in your Fujifilm camera menu that control aperture, specifically the aperture ring. On many Fujifilm cameras, these settings are located in the wrench area. Go to button dial setting. And you may sometimes see this one right here grayed out. Now, the most important thing that you need to know to understand those two settings are the different types of lens setups there are. The first and most common is the regular Fujifilm lens, where you've got your aperture ring right on the lens, and you have these electrical contact points right here. When you put the lens on, they touch these electrical points right on the camera, and now the lens is speaking directly to the camera. And you can put the aperture setting in fully automatic like this, whereby when the lens is connected to the camera takes over and controls aperture automatically. Okay, so that was the first type of lens aperture camera configuration. The second type would be either a third-party lens like this Viltrox, or certain models of Fujifilm lenses that don't have an aperture ring on the lens. However, whether it's a third-party lens or not, it does include these electrical contact points. And what does that mean? It means the lens talks to the camera, okay? It just doesn't have an aperture ring on the lens itself. And finally, we've got our third type of lens camera aperture configuration, and that is like this. It would be any lens, and these apply mainly to third-party lenses, but it would be any lens that has no electrical contact points on the lens, nothing at all. And that is a very big distinction, because when you put one of those lenses on your camera, it doesn't talk to it, it doesn't sense it, it doesn't control it, it has no idea what it is. You know, that would be pretty much the same thing as if the camera had, this Star Trek communicator attached to the front of it. I mean, for all the camera knows, there's no difference. That's annoying. Okay, so now back to these two settings right here. This is where you tell the camera what to do in these type of lens setup situations and how you want things handled with regard to aperture. So the first one, aperture ring setting. You see that right here? It gives you a choice of auto or command. You would use this setting when you have any lens that has contact points on it, right? It's talking to the camera and it's got an aperture ring on the lens itself. That's when you would want to use this setting. And most likely, if you had a lens like that, the other one would be grayed out. And importantly, the aperture ring allows various aperture settings, but also automatic. And automatic obviously means that the camera will take over and control and decide what aperture to set. So with that in mind, this setting allows you to choose either auto or command. If you set it to auto, what that means is that you can still set whatever aperture you want by rotating the aperture ring. And if you put your aperture ring in A, your aperture then goes into automatic mode. Basically, think of it as when I have it in auto, I am then using the lens to control the aperture and to also tell the camera if you want to put it in automatic. Okay, so now if you set aperture ring setting to command instead, what you're doing is you're taking everything that this aperture ring on the lens itself can do, and you're also making it available right here on the front command dial of the camera. Now, in order for this to work, you must have your aperture ring on your lens set to A for automatic. If your lens has an aperture ring, but it doesn't have an A automatic setting, this might not work for you. But when you place it in automatic, you can now start to rotate the front command dial. And as you can see, the front command dial is adjusting aperture. You see that right there? One little quirk to keep in mind on some Fujifilm cameras, if this is not working for you, press and hold in the front command dial. Look at that. You see how it changed? You may have it set where your front command dial is controlling your ISO or your shutter speed. If that's the case, put it to F and make sure that aperture is selected, just like that. Here's the part though that confuses some Fujifilm camera users. Although your aperture ring is in automatic mode, if you are rotating the front command dial and you're setting your aperture to say 5.6 right here, that is a fixed value for your aperture, and that will be the value your camera is going to use no matter what. However, suppose you want now to put it in automatic. In other words, you want your camera to choose, but you also want to keep using the rear command dial. Very easy. Start rotating the rear command dial, and you'll see the aperture cycling through the various settings until you get to the end. Now on this lens, f22, you see that right there? So while I am rotating the front command dial, I start to approach that value right here. And then it's one more rotation over. Watch this. Boom. You see that? What you'll notice is 2 dashes and then they'll quickly disappear and the camera will automatically select an aperture value. Watch this. Ready, go. See that? Put down that cocktail. I'm gonna do it one more time. Pay attention. Ready, go. Now, what that means is that you've now put your aperture mode into automatic, camera's taking charge, and you're using the command dial to do that. And as you rotate the camera, notice how the camera is adjusting your aperture automatically. See that? So now let's talk about the second setting, which a lot of you will see as grayed out. That is the setting that will become active when you put a third-party lens that has no aperture ring, but has an ability to talk to the camera using these contact points. Watch what happens when I put this lens on. As soon as I attach the lens, look at the menu, it went active. Again, this is a lens with no aperture ring, but has an ability to talk to the camera electronically. And this menu setting gives you 3 options. So the first one is the best one, and the one I think you should set it to if you're gonna be using it. It gives you the most versatility, auto plus manual. What this does is exactly what I just showed you previously. You use your front command dial to set a fixed aperture, or you do the thing where you see the 2 little dashes and they quickly change. In other words, you can also set it to automatic. Watch just like this. Ready, go. Now it's on automatic. Remember, there's no ring on the lens, but the camera has taken full control over your aperture. Okay, the second setting is auto. When you choose auto, basically your camera's taken over aperture and your front command dial does absolutely nothing. It's just a pretty little thing you can kind of twiddle. That's it. It will not control your aperture. You've told the camera, I want it fully under automatic control. And finally, if you set it to manual, come on, what do you think's gonna happen here? If you rotate the command dial, you can obviously set a fixed value, which is fine, right? However, you don't get that part where you go to the end and then it goes, it stops, right? It stops at the limit of the aperture of the lens, right here, f16, rotating it the other direction. It stops on the other side of the limit, f1.7 for this particular lens. There is no auto setting, and that can actually come in handy because it's very easily to accidentally put it in auto as you're rotating it quickly, you're out and about shooting. This prevents that from happening and forces the camera to always use a fixed value, and it makes it so that you never accidentally put it into automatic mode using the front command dial. As I said, I just always keep it on that one. By the way, that final scenario I told you where you have a lens that, no, that's not it. You have a lens that has no contact points, camera doesn't speak to it at all, okay? If you put that lens on it where camera is not talking to the lens, it's a third-party lens, neither of those menu settings are gonna have any control whatsoever. You better hope you've got an aperture ring on your lens, because if you don't, good luck setting the aperture. And I want you to notice that as I am rotating the aperture ring on this unknown lens as far as the camera is concerned, look at the aperture value. It's always f0. But notice also how rotating the aperture ring changes my exposure. You're letting in less light. On a physical hardware level, the camera sees less light. It's not talking to the lens, it's just getting less light because you are physically changing the aperture. Camera has nothing to do with that. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful, or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I am gonna be signing off now, but have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in a new video next week. Take care. Yeah, scan Fujifilm headquarters and see if they're working on an X Pro 4. Oh, and beam me up quickly.